Airport employees, what is the saddest goodbye you've witnessed? I worked at a mid-sized airport for a few years, mostly doing gate duties and helping with boarding, but one of the more unusual parts of my job was escorting unaccompanied minors. They would check in, get handed over to me, and I would make sure they got to the plane safely, sometimes even helping with connecting flights. It was routine, but occasionally it brought moments that stuck with me. One morning, a boy about 10 years old came through check-in, small, wiry kid with a backpack that looked bigger than him. His mom was there, obviously nervous, and after the brief check-in, she saw me waiting and hesitated. "Can you give me a few minutes to say goodbye?" she asked. I nodded and stepped aside. She knelt to meet him at eye level, holding his hands. They talked quietly, the kind of hushed conversation that made it clear it wasn't about reminders to behave on the plane or what he should pack. It was the kind of goodbye that went deeper than that, the kind that only happens when parents know they might be parting with their child for real. After a few minutes, she stood, wiped at her eyes, and brought him over to me. I started walking him toward the gate. He was quiet, glancing back at the check-in counters as if expecting her to run after him, which I knew wouldn't happen. I made small talk, asking if he was excited about his trip, explaining where the gate was, and telling him who would meet him at the other end. He nodded, but his eyes stayed downcast, and I could tell he wasn't really listening. Eventually, he opened up a little. His parents were separated, and his mom was sending him to live with his dad. She couldn't afford to feed him properly or pay for school where she was staying, and she couldn't afford a plane ticket herself. That's why he was flying alone. He said matter-of-factly, "I'm never going to see Mom again." His voice was quiet, but I could hear the certainty in it. He wasn't imagining she might visit. He believed he was being left behind. As someone who had experienced a messy divorce as a kid, my stomach dropped. I remembered the nights I cried myself to sleep, worrying about which parent I would see next or if I would ever feel stable again. His little hands clutched his backpack straps, and he shuffled beside me, looking tiny and fragile against the cold, impersonal airport walls. When we got to the security checkpoint, I explained the process, made sure he was comfortable, and even helped him carry his backpack through the scanner. He looked up at me once and whispered, "Will she miss me?" I tried to smile. "She does," I said, not knowing if that was enough or even true. He nodded, like he wanted to believe it, then turned back to the line. At the gate, he sat down in a small chair near the boarding area, swinging his legs, staring at the floor. I watched him from a few feet away as he waited for the call to board. I could see him thinking about all the things a 10-year-old shouldn't have to worry about. The family he had, the home he was leaving behind, and the unknown waiting for him. Finally, the boarding announcement came. He stood, took a deep breath, and handed me his boarding pass. I walked with him to the plane door, and the flight attendant greeted him warmly. I knelt, checked him in, and gave him a small nod of encouragement. He managed a tiny smile, but it didn't reach his eyes. He turned and walked down the jet bridge alone, backpack bouncing against his shoulders. After he disappeared from view, I stood there for a while. The airport was buzzing with passengers rushing to flights, announcements echoing overhead, but I couldn't shake the image of that little boy, walking toward an uncertain future, carrying his entire world on his back. I didn't know his dad, didn't know if he would be welcomed, and didn't know if he would ever see his mom again. I returned to my post, tried to focus on the next flight, the next passenger, but that moment stayed with me. Weeks later, I thought about him often, hoping someone at the other end was there for him, making sure he felt safe and cared for. It was one of those rare, heavy moments in a job full of routine interactions that reminded me how fragile life could be, and how much people, especially kids, were carrying silently. Even now, years later, I can picture him walking down the jet bridge, his backpack too big, his hands clutching the straps, shoulders hunched, and eyes full of a mix of sadness and resolve. I hope he found some comfort, someone who cared, and that he's okay wherever life took him. That day at the airport, watching that boy leave, was the saddest goodbye I've ever witnessed.